Hello, my name is Samuel Stelzner. I'm from Stellenbosch University in South Africa. This presentation forms part of the validation process for my industrial engineering master's thesis entitled The Employee Flourishing Strategic Framework. In 2014, I did some vacation work for Transport for Cape Town's innovation unit. I spent a lot of my time shadowing the head of the unit. In April 2015, he left the city and entered the startup world. He invited me to join him, an offer I excitedly accepted. Before starting anything, we spoke at length about the way we would like to do business. This was largely influenced by his mixed experiences in the public sector and previously in management consulting. We arrived at the mission statement, simply making happiness happen. This would come to define the culture of our startup. We then proceeded to build a team of partners and a network of businesses. The first of these was Chop Chop, pictured here, a healthy fast food franchise, which you can find at 75 Harrington Street, Cape Town. This experience had a big impact on me. The idea of simply making happiness happen has come to define my worldview and set of values. The home page of my personal blog on the topic is pictured here. This experience also came at a time when I was exploring potential research topics for my master's. It has been an absolute pleasure to spend the last year and a half researching a topic that I find intrinsically motivating. Right, now that I've given you some context, I'll move on to the actual content. This study is rooted in the industrial engineering domain. Industrial engineering is concerned with the improvements of integrated systems, for example, an enterprise, of which people play an integral part. People are also the core focus of positive psychology, a field that has further inspired this study. Positive psychology is defined as the formulation and building of the good life. The experience of the good life is expressed as people's ultimate goal. Many would describe the good life as one that is filled with happiness. The parallels between positive psychology and my startup experience are clear. A focus on people is the link between industrial engineering and positive psychology. In this study, I propose designing an enterprise to provide employees with the experience of the good life. I argue that an employee who receives this experience is motivated to sustain the enterprise that provides it. Designing for the experience of the good life is therefore a strategy for long-term gains in enterprise performance. This is the guiding mandate of industrial engineering. Positive psychology emerged in the 90s in an effort to complement the traditional areas of psychology. Psychologists have become very good at treating depression and other conditions of mental illness over the last 50 years. Experts say that the challenge for the next 50 is to do the same for happiness. The science of happiness has brought some much-needed structure to what has become something of a global movement. This is evidenced in politics. For example, United Nations Resolution 65/309, titled Happiness, Towards a Holistic Approach to Development, and the Gross National Happiness Metric, described as a policy of balancing sustainable growth against the often damaging results of rampant wealth. There is also increasing attention being paid to happiness in the workplace. Silicon Valley has started a trend of hiring chief happiness officers in charge of the well-being of their employees. Enterprises are beginning to manage their employees' experience of the good life. So, my study's research purpose is to assist in this endeavor. It is to develop a conceptual model to assist enterprises in managing the employee experience of the good life. In order to achieve the research purpose, the study is split into 11 chapters, each comprised of a number of research methods. In summary, the research unfolds as follows. Chapters 1, 2, and 3 feed the development of design requirements in Chapter 4. A design methodology for a conceptual model is developed in Chapter 5. This model is then designed and optimized in Chapters 6, 7, and 8, followed by verification that the design requirements have been met, and validation that the design model effectively meets a recognized business need. I'll now walk you through this roadmap in a bit more detail. The first research method is to investigate literature surrounding the employee experience of the good life. Positive psychology is a relatively new field. One issue is that there does not seem to be a globally accepted construct for this experience. The study is therefore positioned as an early adopter of the contents of this developing field. It includes a critical discussion of developing a construct for the experience of the good life. This discussion arrives at the notion of flourishing. Flourishing is defined by the pillars on which it is built, 5 pursuits that are all empirically proven to be self-evident. They are positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment, collectively known as PERMA. This study extends the flourishing model to include control of depression and anxiety in order to ensure that both the positive and negative sides of the mental health continuum are accounted for. This construct is derived from a study of the operationalization of flourishing in Australian schools. This study includes a questionnaire that forms the basis for measuring the experience of the good life. After this discussion, the term flourishing is generally used to describe this experience. A strategic framework is adopted as an appropriate type of conceptual model. The title, Employee Flourishing Strategic Framework, or EFSF, is now clear. This type of conceptual model provides steps for implementing, monitoring, and evaluating activities at the objective level and packages the bodies of knowledge relevant to the topic of interest. This highlights the point that this study is new in the industrial engineering academic domain. It is positioned as a broad overview, applicable to all enterprises, and a starting point for further and more localized research and application. As mentioned, the first 3 chapters feed the development of design requirements. 21 requirements are developed in total. My literature review shows that typically these can be fit into 5 categories. I'll describe each category and list one requirement from each. Functional requirements describe what the EFSF is intended to do. It should prescribe a process for managing employee flourishing, supplemented by a toolset. User requirements describe the specific requirements from the user's viewpoint. It should produce contextual elements from an objective, scientific standpoint that may be of practical use to the enterprise. Design restrictions are restrictions designated by the designer about the preferred solution space. As much as possible, the EFSF should be applicable to all established enterprises, and it should focus on the employee's psychological experience of work. Attention points are not hard requirements, but specifications relevant to design. This study should showcase the development of the EFSF. Boundary conditions are rules that may or may not be altered by the design. Use of the EFSF should adhere to local laws and regulations. The EFSF design methodology is newly developed for the purposes of this study. One of its main benefits is that it allows the researchers to walk readers through the stage development of the framework, allowing them to leverage the logic for further studies and local application. An initial framework process is developed from an observation according to inductive research theory. This process is then run through and optimized using deductive research. This includes the development of tools and elements that detail the process. This methodology is inspired, in part, by Eric Ries's lean startup movement, characterized by the build, measure, learn cycle. This cycle allows businesses or researchers to test ideas through short iterations, ensuring that there's minimal waste of resources throughout development. So having followed the EFSF methodology, this is the final iteration of the process that I've come up with. We'll be looking at its components shortly. Here is a snapshot of the EFSF tools and elements, which are listed per stage of the EFSF process. I've highlighted an example that we've already touched on. In the early stages of the EFSF, I advise forming a strategic vision and mission for managing the employee experience of the good life. The relevant tools are vision and mission statements. The elements that I've developed are a vision to be global leaders in flourishing. This describes the state in which you want the enterprise to be. And I've also developed a mission to maximize the experience of PERMA and minimize the experience of depression and anxiety across all members of the enterprise. This describes what you are doing now in order to achieve the vision. A number of bodies of knowledge are identified during the study as relevant to the topic of managing employee flourishing. They are packaged within the industrial engineering domain. These bodies of knowledge are used to build the EFSF. I will showcase each in turn by highlighting relevant sections of the EFSF process. A systems approach exists at the core of the EFSF process. The systems approach states that constituent parts combine to form an interrelated whole. A better overall understanding of a problem is gained by building up the whole as a sum of the individual parts. The whole problem is broken down into the parts of the problem. Solutions are investigated in response to the parts of the problem. These are then packaged into the whole solution. The systems approach forms part of the enterprise engineering domain. I'm in the enterprise engineering research group at Stellenbosch University. Enterprise engineering is the application of design principles to business management. It recognizes that enterprises are highly complex entities. Management therefore requires a holistic approach. The enterprise engineering perspective is thus facilitated by the systems approach. The EFSF advises enterprises to take stock of the whole problem. I label this the faltering development of flourishing. Derive the problem parts, obstacles to flourishing, evaluate the solution parts, means to flourish effectively, and consequently develop the whole solution, an employee flourishing program. The EFSF is aimed at established enterprises. It is noted that adopting a perspective of employee flourishing is likely to require some enterprise change. One of the reasons for this is the legacy of Frederick Taylor's Principles of Scientific Management. Taylor separated management from the enterprise in a mechanistic view. The enterprise, like a machine, needs to be controlled by management. This view has come under criticism for its view of employees as mere cogs in the machine. This study calls for a changed approach. Literature states that change management programs are successful when initiated at the beginning of a project. This insight results in the incorporation of parts of a change management process to the beginning of the EFSF process. The Harvard Business Review presents Kotter's Leading Change as its feature article in its 2011 edition on 10 must-reads on change management. Kotter's work has since been updated to remain at the forefront of change management. It is therefore used as the primary source for developing a change management process within the EFSF. The first 3 steps of Kotter's process are specified in the first stage of the EFSF process, labeled here as initiate a change towards flourishing. The first step is to create a sense of urgency surrounding the problem of employee flourishing. This begins with showcasing the whole problem according to the systems approach. Creating a sense of urgency is enabled by appealing for support from the executive committee, which is bound by shareholders' expectations, by highlighting the correlation between flourishing and short-term performance, as evidenced by Gallup, for example, whose study shows that positive employees are 33% more profitable. A second means to create a sense of urgency is to leverage case studies of successful enterprises that champion the case for employee flourishing. Examples include Google, Zappos, and Tom's. The second step is to build a guiding coalition from a strategic HRM unit. This unit should carry influence throughout the enterprise. The term Flourishing Coalition is adopted. The Flourishing Coalition should lead flourishing projects through the innovation management process, something I'll talk about soon. The third step is to form a strategic vision and mission that describes the enterprise's understanding of flourishing based on the state of the art. This sets the basis for forming a flourishing metric. Forming such a metric is critical because as it is so often quoted in business, what you measure is what you get. While an invention is a new or novel idea, an innovation is the successful commercialization of such an idea. The EFSF incorporates innovation management to ensure ideas surrounding employee flourishing are successfully implemented. These are termed flourishing projects. The EFSF's primary source for innovation management is the book Designed for Six Sigma plus Lean Toolset, edited by Stephen Linnell. Six Sigma effectively means reducing defects in a process to under 3.4 per million, and lean management is a systematic method for eliminating waste. They are thus both forms of optimization. The book offers the DMADV phased approach as a best-in-class approach for effectively and efficiently realizing ideas. DMADV is equal to define, measure, analyze, design, verify. So once a strategic vision and mission have been defined in the initial stages of change management, a flourishing project is defined by the Flourishing Coalition. Employee needs are then measured in the second and third quadrants of the systems approach. Concepts to fulfill these needs are analyzed and form part of an employee flourishing program in quadrant 4 of the systems approach. The best concept is selected and designed in detail. The detailed concept is verified by developing a supporting implementation process and handing it over to the appropriate enterprise team. The DMADV phases are interspersed by gate reviews to evaluate whether the phase has been successfully completed. After verification of a flourishing project, the Flourishing Coalition returns to the defined phase to embark on further projects. Literature from positive psychology has been used to introduce this presentation. This mostly surrounds establishing a construct for the experience of the good life, a necessary starting point for managing employee flourishing. Literature states that a number of constructs in organizational behavior appear to have some overlap with the broad concepts of happiness in the workplace. These fields are highlighted in the EFSF during the measure phase of the innovation management process and in the second and third quadrants of the systems approach. This section focuses on employee needs, categorized into obstacles to flourishing and means to flourish effectively. While these need to be specified in a local context, the EFSF offers a few elements for these categories based on positive psychology and organizational behavior literature. The obstacles investigated are defining and measuring the experience of the good life, hedonic adaptation, the downside to economic utility, perceived irrelevance of happiness in the workplace, the rush of the day, and overcoming short-sightedness. The primary source of inspiration for the means to flourish effectively is Lubomirsky, Sheldon, and Schrader's investigation of the chronic factors of subjective well-being. This produces intentional activity as the most promising source of producing sustained increases in happiness. Interestingly, the study's data shows that intentional activity has a greater effect than life circumstances, such as income, health, and relationship status. Intentional activity is distinguished as the way people act on their circumstances. Activity is then discussed as a process of meeting innate psychological needs, as evidenced by Deci and Ryan's self-determination theory, or SDT. SDT holds that people are intrinsically motivated to be competent, autonomous, and relational. This echoes the flourishing model, which holds that people are intrinsically motivated towards positive emotion, engagement, relationship, meaning, and accomplishment. Knowledge of PERMA, for example, may help people know what to pursue in order to achieve flourishing, but this does not answer the question of how. To fulfill this need, positive psychology offers the study of character strengths and virtues. These are theorized to empower people to achieve PERMA. They include social intelligence, leadership, self-control, honesty, and a love of learning, for example. The EFSF therefore calls for enterprises to specify employee needs and to manage strength as well as skill. The field of human resource management, or HRM, is readily seen as relevant to the EFSF. The first steps of the change management process call for a flourishing coalition to be built from an HRM department. This is based on the evolution of HRM into a more strategic role player within the enterprise. The concept of the human resource advantage has propelled HRM above its traditional administrative role. It now plays a key part in producing organisational effectiveness, meaning that it enables an enterprise to achieve its strategic goals. The EFSF therefore prompts building a flourishing coalition from a strategic HRM department. This coalition should work alongside the executive committee and across enterprise teams to ensure employee flourishing is ingrained into the enterprise. The coalition takes primary responsibility for developing flourishing projects during the innovation management process. Strategic HRM is also particularly relevant to the fourth quadrant of the systems approach. The fourth quadrant contains the whole solution, described as an employee flourishing program. The simple procedure for building an employee flourishing program is as follows. Highlight an obstacle to flourishing and/or means to flourish effectively, and develop a concept in response. These concepts are typically formed as HRM systems and practices. The slide includes a snapshot of some of my ideas for an employee flourishing program. For example, 20% time, the first concept shown. This is a practice used by Google that allows employees to work on their own projects for 20% of the time. Gmail is an example of a product that originated from 20% time. This concept is packaged into the HRM system of job analysis and design. These high-level concepts are then specified as the flourishing project continues into the design phase of innovation management. The first three steps of Kotta's change management process are incorporated to the beginning of the EFSF. The fourth step, enlisting a volunteer army, is thought to happen relatively organically. Employees are likely to volunteer to a program aimed at improving their experience of work. The fifth step, enable action by removing barriers, is highlighted as a key concept within an employee flourishing program. The final three steps are incorporated to the end of the EFSF. At this stage, the EFSF calls for generating short-term wins by assessing and marketing the impact of flourishing projects on the flourishing metric, sustaining acceleration by rapidly repeating the EFSF process to generate further flourishing projects, instituting change by assessing correlation between improvements in flourishing metrics and increased enterprise performance, showing that the enterprise may be sustained through flourishing projects. Cementing the change towards flourishing concludes the EFSF process. This is envisioned as a means to improve employee flourishing and thereby achieve business success. So I'm currently working on validating the usefulness of the study in achieving this vision. This requires obtaining external perspective. The primary questions that I'm asking for your expert opinion on are: does the study address a recognized business need, and does the EFSF assist in addressing this need? There is also an opportunity for you to comment on the design of the research study. This presentation forms the background for the questionnaire you should have with you. Please can you now turn your attention towards it. Please score the questions relevant to you and use the boxes to elaborate on your score and provide any further comments. Your answers will inform final amendments to the EFSF and recommendations for research. Thank you so much for your time.